The Creative Psychotherapist is the official podcast of the Creative Clinicians Corner, a practice-building resource for creative psychotherapists. TCP Podcast is the cast for creative, expressive, and experiential-focused psychotherapists curious to learn how to design, build, and scale a thriving private practice. Your host, Reina Lombardi, interviews successful therapists about the tools and strategies they have used to develop creative-focused practices. They also talk about the products, services, and side hustles they have developed using their knowledge and creativity to enhance their therapy practices, make a greater impact in their communities, and diversify their income streams. Welcome. Now here's your host, Reina Lombardi.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Psychotherapist Podcast. I'm your guest host, Dr. Rachel Brandoff, sitting in today for Reina Lombardi. I'm delighted to be hosting today to have the opportunity to interview the regular host of the Creative Psychotherapist Podcast, Reina Lombardi, who is a registered board-certified art therapist, an art therapy certified supervisor, and a licensed mental health counselor and qualified supervisor practicing in Fort Myers, Florida. Reina is the owner of the Florida Art Therapy Services, where she manages and mentors a small team of therapists who provide in-person and technology-facilitated individual and group art therapy and counseling services. Additionally, she's contracted art therapy groups at various community agencies, supervision and continuing education programming for counselors and art therapists. She's contributed to several academic texts on the topic of art therapy and clinical supervision, and she's also a frequent presenter at local and national conferences. A little bit more about Reina Lombardi. She also is the owner of the Creative Clinicians Corner, where she provides practice building resources and consultation services for creative arts therapists who have the desire to build and scale their own private practices and realize their own unique professional dreams. She's the host of the Creative Psychotherapist Podcast, and on this, she regularly interviews successful creative therapists about different tools and strategies that they employ to grow their dream practices. She also talks to people about how they have hustled to create additional income streams and how they use their knowledge and creativity to develop products and services that enhance or supplement their therapy practices. Welcome, Reina, to your own podcast.
It's so weird.
Oh, I'm so happy to get to be the one to sit here and interview you. There is endless amount of things that we could talk about and have. Just in the service of full disclosure to our listeners, I've had the pleasure of counting you as a close colleague and also as a personal friend for almost 20 years now.
That's so crazy, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Yeah, I can't believe that, when you say it's been that long, but it really has. And so Rachel and I met in grad school and have been kind of collaborative forces since that time.
Absolutely. We were both transplants to a much colder climate. And I remember I was feeling hungry for an art making outlet. And I found a partner in that in you. Fairly quickly into our program, Reina and I made the commitment to each other that we would get together one night a week for art making. And it was such a valuable service to me then and so many times since then.
No, that's so true. I forgot about that part. And then that evolved into realizing that the university didn't have a student chapter for the Art Therapy Association. And so we developed a student chapter together at the school, which is really wild to think that we did that back then. But it speaks to, I think, both of us having a very entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, I agree. And also seeing sort of a void or an absence in the community and wanting to be instrumental in filling that void, in stepping in. Some schools have active chapters of the National Professional Association, and ours didn't, and we took that as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've heard from other people that it's still going, although I don't really know more than from past students, more recent graduates saying, oh yeah, that's still around, which
That
is
would be a
nice to hear.
wonderful thing to hear. Yeah. So for our listeners' information, the reason that you're being interviewed on your own podcast today is as a part of the Voices from the Summit series. So Reina did a Voices from the Summit series starting in this prior fall, where she interviewed different creative professionals who were involved in the Expressive Therapy Summit, a professional conference that started in 2010 and is going into its 12th year now, starting in 2021. And the Voices from the Summit series was a way of highlighting some of the very diverse faculty who bring a wealth of different clinical specializations, modalities, techniques, and approaches to probably one of the most diverse professional conference audience I've ever seen. So I want to start with talking a little bit about the origin of the summit and your origin with the summit, because you've been involved from the very beginning. And can you tell our listeners a little bit how you became involved in the summit?
Well, if anybody listened to the first Voices from the Summit series episode with Barry Cohen and you listen to his story, it kind of starts from there where he brought you into the fold through this New York connection, and you were wanting him to teach the diagnostic drawing series training in New York. And then, I guess somehow in the conversation, he had suggested making it even more than that and creating the Expressive Therapy Summit. And you're like, yes, let's do it. And and then pretty quickly, I think you either emailed me or called me and said, hey, I'm going to be doing this. Would you be willing to present at it? And would you be willing to help me find other therapists that might be willing to present at it?
So I want to ask you to slow down a little bit and help our listeners understand a little bit about your process. So at the time, here you are, an art therapist working in or around Fort Myers, Florida, and you were working full-time for a community mental health agency, maybe more than one full-time job even at the time, if I remember correctly. And a friend and colleague who lives in a completely different state, in a completely different region, is asking you to get involved in a professional conference in New York when here you are focused on building your career in Florida. What was your thinking like about saying yes to involvement in this?
Well, I mean, I think probably at the first thought was, is this really going to happen? Are they really going to be able to bring life to such an event in New York City, given that there's no budget for the event and you guys were kind of working around the clock to put it together? But on the other hand, I thought, well, if anybody can do it, you could do it. And I thought, well, I want to get involved in that if it's something that you were really energized about and your energy was very contagious. And so I was like, yeah, I want to be a part of that and want to be able to contribute and expand beyond whatever the work I was doing at that time here. Yeah.
Great, great. I think that that description really probably summarizes a lot of the professional activities and personal that we've gotten involved in over the years, is just being with somebody who you feel a resonance with, and you feel sort of a like-minded interest, and you feed off of that contagious energy.
Definitely. And I think too, it's like being with somebody else who's willing to take a leap of faith and to commit to doing something regardless of what the outcome is, right? That, we're going to do this. We don't exactly know what is going to happen with it, but we're committed to doing it at least once. We're going to give it a try. We're going to see if it's effective, if people respond well to it, and then decide what happens next. And I, for me, I feel like that's really exciting.
Yeah.
I like that process.
So I love your description of it as a leap of faith. And I think that while that can aptly describe your choosing to get involved in the summit, it's also an interesting description of what you're doing now in your personal life, in your professional life, in your practice, and also what you're doing in the Creative Clinicians Corner and at the summit. So just as a little bit of background for our listeners, Reina will be presenting in April 2021 at the Expressive Therapy Summit in LA on a similar topic that she presented on in the fall of 2020 at the New York Summit, which is about helping professional therapists build and scale their private practices or their private practice related endeavors in a way that is responsible, ethical, financially sound, and also honors their unique visions and interests.
Mhm.
And this is something that you really took your own leap of faith on in starting your private practice, and now have developed into an area of specialization where you help other people take that leap of faith, identify
Mhm.
what is the leap that they want to make and what would it take to do so and how to do it. So can you talk a little bit about what this process was like for you?
Gosh. Well, I think it was a slow process, right? So, thinking back to kind of where we started with the summit, you kind of pulled me in the first year and I went and I presented, but I also helped behind the scenes and started to get more involved. The next year, you and I attended the ATA conference, which was in DC at the time. And during that time, you had a private practice in New York City and we're kind of doing that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing that and it's working. And we had a really long conversation one night after the conference, and we were talking about how to do that. How do I go out on my own? And you were like, you could totally do it. Absolutely. And I was like, I don't think I can do it. Like, I'm terrified. I just don't feel like I have the business sense and acumen at the time. I definitely didn't have the knowledge, but I hadn't been pursuing that knowledge either. And, when you start to do something new, it forces you to seek out additional education in those areas that you're lacking. So, it started to pique my curiosity, that conversation, and that was in like 2011. And at that point I was like, okay, I am ready to do this. And so one of the first things that I did when I got home was I started to seek out opportunities to do that, but to do it along with somebody else who already had a practice. So I didn't take the full deep dive into doing my own thing. I joined another expressive play therapy focused practice in the area. And I found that that was a really great fit for me because of how closely aligned play therapy and art therapy really are. And so I worked at that practice for several years, and I kind of slowly titrated down, leaving a full-time job. At first, I was full-time with benefits at a place, and then I was working part-time in the evenings at the practice. And then over time, that started to switch where I found a part-time job that offered a consistent small salary, but did have benefits. And that allowed me to increase my hours in private practice. And then eventually leaving that salaried position to go full into private practice at the group practice where I was at. And during that time, I had been saving everything that I was earning from the practice job. I was putting that into a separate banking account, and I was only using that for professional development opportunities, licensing, any additional coursework that I needed to take, exams, all of that stuff. Because when I started, I didn't have my licensed mental health counselors. I didn't have that license. I just had the ATR-BC. And so I wanted to finish doing that. I had kind of given up on that because it was a challenge coming from out of state into Florida. Florida's requirements were a bit different than in Massachusetts. And I had to take several graduate level courses, which, of course, if you're taking graduate level courses and you're not an enrolled student, you don't qualify for financial aid. So you have to pay for that out of pocket. And so I had saved up that money and so that I could pay for all those things. And it wasn't until um, kind of it was 2015. In 2015, I I was like, okay, I feel really comfortable. I feel really safe. It's really easy. I know what I'm doing in my colleague and friends practice. And I could have stayed there in that safe bubble where she took care of everything. Or I could leave and take another dive and see if I could do it on my own. And that's what I ultimately decided to do. And it was almost like an instant decision when it happened. I knew at some point, okay, I was working towards that, but it was like it was like almost an instant decision of like, okay, this is what I need to do and I need to do it now. And then I went in like the next week and did it.
So an
And
instant decision that was made over many, many years and with preparation.
right, but it was like I was getting ready to be ready to be ready to do it myself. So all of that, leading up to it was all my getting ready to be ready. And then once I was ready, it was like, you're ready to do this. You're too safe and comfortable over here. You need to get uncomfortable again because that's where you grow.
Well, I think it speaks a little bit to you and your process that your leap of faith was not a single event or episode, but that was a series of steps and choices over the course of many years. And I think that I don't think a leap of faith has to be entirely spontaneous or dangerous to
Yeah.
be a leap of faith. Um, but you said something that was really interesting to me. And I think that this really speaks to a way that you make a lot of choices in your life and specifically in your career, which is that when you do something new, you need to learn about it. You need to get education around it. And I don't think that that's something that everybody subscribes to or believes,
Mm.
or perhaps maybe they might believe it, but they might not live it. Um, and one of the things that we know and that we have found over many years is that there's plenty of people who are in private practice or who are running a private practice who did not get there with the planning and intentionality that you did, that they sort of did it more impulsively.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people who tends to act more impulsively. Um,
And that's okay. Like both ways are okay. Just putting that
well,
out there.
it certainly has its time and place. But I think that one of the things that you've learned in your own process and that you really work on with your clients who are growing and developing their own practice is how do you identify the aspects of doing this work in a private practice type of setting, um, and doing it in a way that is thorough, responsible, legal, and ethical, and that sort of accounts for all of the type of issues that come up, all of those things that you've had to learn along the way. And so I have sort of a two-part question, which is, when you first started talking about and learning about this process, in 2010 or in 2011, there was not so much out there in creative arts therapies on, starting a private practice, launching a business.
Mm-mm.
In fact, there was a limited amount in psychotherapy in general about how to do that part of the work
Mm-hmm.
that we do. In the past decade, there's been a growing amount of research and literature and podcasts and books on this, to the point where now there's a lot of discourse, and in some cases just opinion, about how you should do it or what you should do. Um, and there's a lot to sift through, and I know you
Mm-hmm.
have done a lot of you read books regularly, you've taken courses, you consult your own mentors and specialists in this area. How have you managed to sift through and find the resources that you have that best serve your progress and your business development? And then how do you also sort of curate those materials for the clients who you are helping to develop their practices?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a really big question. So let me start with um, how do I find the resources and what's my process around that? And I'll say that even before our conversation, it was always in the back of my mind. I always knew that I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to have that autonomy over my life. I wanted to be able to determine when and how I worked, because I really feel like it's important to have that. For me, it feels oppressive to work in a corporate institution or a system. It's never been it's never been part of how I thrived. And that would go back even before becoming a therapist, even in my younger years. The places where I thrived working were for families. I worked in a lot of family owned businesses, and I admired and looked up to them and what they did, but not just how they ran their business, but there's a different quality relationally, in my experience. Somebody who owns their own business, who wants to curate, cultivate, care for the employees in their care, versus working in a system with a corporatized agenda and profits to be made and things like that. And I'm not saying that, hey, that's bad. No, that's great. Other people thrive in that environment. I'm just saying that's not where I thrived. I thrived in this relational dynamic where I felt that there was a vested interest in my development, a vested interest in my growth. And that was an exchange in how I showed up and worked for the families that I worked for. And so I kind of knew, even before I went to grad school, I wanted to have my own place because I wanted to be able to do that for myself, right? That ability to do that for myself, but also to be able to do that for other people that might come into my fold and work with me. And so that part I feel like is really an integral aspect of the conversation that we're having. Um, and the more I worked in, community mental health and even education, educational systems as a provider, the more I saw the real importance and need to have different options for people to be successful. Because I have to say, um, in the amount of time that I spent working in that area, I can only think of a few mentors, supervisors above me that I felt like, wow, this place, if it was a corporatized system, okay, that this place, that this manager or this person really cares about their employees. And I believe that the employee needs to be cared for, the therapist needs to be cared for in order for the therapist to be whole enough to contain, to provide that container for the client and care for the client. So I look at it from that perspective. One, then before I had it all together to figure out, like, okay, I'm going to do this. I read a book, and the book was about how to, how to start a private practice. And I read it once and I thought, I feel nauseous. I want to throw up. I don't know if I can do that. Even though I really, really wanted to, because like I'm really passionate about this other part. And that's part of why I want to do the work that I do. And I want to lead others to do this kind of work too, so that they have that ability to work and care for themselves in the way they need to be cared for, which oftentimes working within the system doesn't necessarily allow, which is one of the reasons why I love doing contract work within the systems, because I can still participate, I can still contribute, but I am not governed by the dogma of the operations of that system.
So I'm going to stop you right there to ask you what that book was that you read that made you nauseous, but it sounded like really provoked something in you.
Oh, goodness. It was an old one. And I want to say it was How to Get Started in Private Practice. I can see the book, and it's probably definitely in my like reference list for when I teach on the topic. And then through that book, after I felt nauseous and was like, oh, I'm giving up on that for a while, um, I came back to it and I read it again. And the second time I read it, I think I was a little farther along in my professional development. I felt a little more confident. I mean, I was still hesitant and still a little bit nervous, and the what if monster was showing up. What if this, what if that? But I was able to look at that and start to pull out parts that made sense to me to begin to create systems and an approach to help me solve the problems that I was up against in terms of how to go about setting up a private practice. Primarily, how does one come to determine what your fee should be? That question, I think, perplexes a lot of therapists.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that people really value about your process and working with you, whether it's as a workshop attendee at a conference or as a client of your Creative Clinicians Corner who's getting help in developing their practice, is that you have a way of addressing and helping them tackle both sort of the fantastical abstract topics like, where do you see yourself and what do you want your practice to be? What's your vision? But also the really sort of nitty gritty and concrete issues like how much do you charge? Do you market? And if so, where and when and how much? And what is your budget for marketing? Things like that that are sometimes described as the boring parts or the pain points of starting a business. But you really work on all of the pieces of that puzzle.
Yeah, I try. I feel like it's really important even as my work as a therapist, I feel like it's important to pull those two things together. How do we interweave them? We can't live in the fantasy, right? It's important for us to spend time in the fantasy. It's really important for us to dream and to visualize and to expand our consciousness as to what's possible for us. That's really important. But okay, now that I've done all of that dreaming and visioning and visualizing, if I don't create a strategic plan of how to get there, I might not get there. And that might bring up feelings of fear, lack, inability, things that are not so comfortable, right? It's something that I really, really want, but I just don't feel like I have the tools in my arsenal to get there. And so then pulling in all of those skills to say, here, it's really, if you have all of these parts formulated for you, now you have a framework that you can implement and take off. So it's that bridging of the two. I don't know if that answers your question.
So it does, and I think that the strategic plan applies to both the sort of big picture kind of dreamy questions and also to the nitty gritty businessy type issues that have to happen for
Right.
a practice to run. So this
Right.
is a sort of relevant question. I mean, through your podcast and through your consulting business, you have met and talked to many, many different therapists, some who are very successful, who have thriving practices, who have developed their tools and strategies and are achieving their goals and doing exactly what they want or even beyond what they had planned for. But I know you've also seen and spoken to many therapists who have launched private practice or and are not seeing the success and the gains and the life that they would have wanted or thought when they launched, or they haven't even gotten to the point of launching because they're still stuck in the doubt and the what ifs and the feeling like they can't make it happen.
Yeah.
So what I want to ask you is, it might sort of draw on a little bit of what you've seen with other people, but I'm curious really about your experience. What do you think separates you from people whose practices are not thriving or successful? And just to give our listeners some context, you went from working in somebody else's private practice but when you launched your own practice, and you did talk a little bit about feeling ready to do that, by the time you did that, you were able to pretty quickly fill your roster of clients with paying clients, and you probably could have stayed in a comfortably full private practice, but then you decided to even scale up and grow Florida Art Therapy Services, and you've brought in other therapists, you've brought in interns, you have more clients than you could possibly see yourself, you have groups running, so you've been able to really scale your own practice so it's bigger than yourself. Can you say something about what are the ingredients or the tools or the things that made that possible? What separates you from somebody, let's say, for example, a clinician who has a private practice, but can't fill all of their client slots or can't get enough clients to sustain themselves and make a living and give up the other job,
Mhm.
perhaps? Um,
Yeah.
what are you
S-
doing right, in other words?
Gosh, I feel like, have you ever made Osso Bucco?
No, but I want to hear about this.
Right. So if you've ever made Osso Bucco, it's like one of those recipes where there's a ton of prep work that occurs. And it's the magic of all of the things, melding together and melting together in the pot, you know, over a long period of time. It simmers, it's a slow cooking dish. And it just, and there's tons of ingredients in it, and it just melts in your mouth and it's perfect and it's delicious. Well, I kind of feel like practice building is like that. There are lots of moving parts, and but the one ingredient that is most important is the love that you have to do the work that you're setting out to do, right? Everybody knows like the best ingredient in really great food is love. If the cook is not in a place of like really in that zone, it really comes out in the nuances of the food. Um, but two, it's patience, right? When you're going to cook a dish like that, it's going to be a process. You're not looking for instant gratification. You have to be committed to, dicing up all of your ingredients and spending time, procuring them, and then waiting as everything comes together. Like, practice building is like that. You have to be committed to obtaining all of the different ingredients that you need to be successful. Um, that includes personal mindset work. It might include going back into your own personal therapy to overcome any self limiting beliefs that one has. That can be a real killer of dreams. If I don't believe that it's possible for me to have a full, thriving, and successful practice, well, that belief is going to filter into every effort that I'm making on some unconscious level. And that is going to impact the results that we get of our efforts. So, working on the mindset that your personal work is really important. In fact, I believe that as an entrepreneur, and I wouldn't discriminate between being an entrepreneur as a therapist or being an entrepreneur as a restaurateur or being an entrepreneur as a realtor or whatever have you. As an entrepreneur, you have to push your own personal boundaries all the time. And it is a massive effort and self growth and in the pursuit of self growth and discovery. And so you are simultaneously doing the work of self, overcoming those challenges, challenging those limiting beliefs, right? Feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Um, you know, if you don't, then if you can't do that, then I think that's where people aren't so successful. Like, I've known a couple of people that have tried to open a private practice on a couple of occasions and it just doesn't pan out and they end up closing it. But part of it is, I think, it's like analysis paralysis. I start to look up all the information and then I get paralyzed by all of it. I'm not sure which person's information is correct and which information I should be using. And so then I don't do anything. And then, of course, if you don't do anything, you don't take action in any department, you're not going to experience any results. You know, you have to be able to not only consume the knowledge, but analyze the knowledge and then pick out the parts that are relevant to you and what you want to do, and then apply them in a way that aligns with what your goals are and what you want to achieve and what's expected ethically and legally so that you can continue to operate, as a therapist. So it's not just let me consume the knowledge, but I really have to pull out the parts that are most important, figure out how to apply them and actually do it. So it's combination of like the work of the self, but also the work of the business. The other ingredient I think that is really integral is a commitment. It is a commitment. I am committing myself to this process. I will tell you that in the first place that I worked at in private practice, um, I showed up before I had any clients, and I showed up for my shifts. So I was like scheduled from like 4 to 8, right? I was going to see clients a couple of days a week on 4 to 8. And so I would go in, I didn't have any clients yet, but I would just go in and I would sit in the office at the office. And I would be reading all of the consents and going through all the paperwork, really trying to memorize that so that I could um, effectively execute being able to speak about it without having to read it line for line when I sat down with my clients for the first session. I was looking at all the resources and materials that were available to me to assist me in my job. I was getting acquainted with the therapy rooms and all of the materials therein so that when I went in there for the first time with a client, I knew what I had access to and what I would be able to offer and provide. And I did this for a couple of weeks. And the other therapists were like, what the hell are you doing here? You don't have any clients. Why are you wasting your time here? But that speaks to my thought process around the importance of committing. I was committed to being there. I was committed to getting clients. I was committed to pursuing this. And and that makes a huge difference. I've seen that in bringing on independent contractors within my practice to see clients. Oh yeah, I want to do it, but they really don't have any commitment to being here. And that, I don't know what it is. I mean, it might be a little woo woo, but their energy isn't here. Therefore, clients aren't connecting with that energy. You know, I know it's a
It
little
sounds
bit,
like you're saying that the clients can really feel the commitment that you make, which helps them to feel committed to you and in their
yeah,
process. I think
yeah,
I think this is a really great point and showcases how unique you are in the way you view running your practice and helping other people to run theirs, and speaks to the fact that um, if the recipe you want, I love your analogy. If what you want is Osso Bucco, you're not just gonna throw a bone of meat in the Instant Pot and hope it happens all by itself. You might get something edible, you might get food, but it's not the same thing. And if what you're going for is something that is complex and nuanced and layered, then you have to recognize that from the beginning and put that time and attention into it. And by the way, just as a gift to the reader, to the listeners here, I want your Osso Bucco recipe, and let's put it in the liner notes too, because I think everybody's going to want to, after hearing you describe, all the love that goes into it.
oh my goodness, that's so funny. I haven't
For
made it
those
in a few years, so I would have to look through my recipe envelope at home.
Oh, it's in there somewhere. And for those of you who don't know, that is just another wonderful talent of Reina Lombardi. She's an incredible cook.
Thank you, Rachel. It's part of my as part of my creative expression and outlet, I learned early on in college, like, well, I always loved to cook, but I realized it was part of my like self-care, and it helped me cope with test taking anxiety. So I would get myself so worked up before the night of a test. So for example, I would tell you, I I registered for the SAT and I never took it because I was paralyzed with test taking anxiety. And so I couldn't even leave my room that morning. I woke up, I knew I was supposed to go, and I just sat there like a deer in headlights on my bed, and I never got up to go. And the reason I share this is because we were talking about that personal work that we have to do. And like that's how far I've come to go from the person, as a teenager who was so paralyzed by fear that they couldn't get up out of bed to go to take the SAT, to somebody who is willing to say, F you. I don't care what you have to say. I'm doing this, and I'm not going to look back, and I'm just going to push ahead and move through my fear. That's a big thing. So go ahead.
So I know you've had a lot of people in your life who have helped you push through your fear, both therapists, mentors, friends. Um, I imagine that you probably see this in some of your clients with the Creative Clinicians Corner who want to be in their own practice, who want to start their own thing, but are really just paralyzed by their own fear.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to somebody like that? Or how do you as a mentor and consultant, because of course, just saying to somebody get over it isn't always the thing that really helps. What do you have them do, or how do you have them engage in activities that will help them to push themselves past that fearful state of, I want something, but I can't get it. It's inaccessible to me.
Well, one of the things I would always suggest is, hey, maybe you want to pursue your own work around that, right? Like you might want to go back into some therapy if there's something deeper. But the other thing is, are you willing to do some exercises to make friends with your fear? Are you willing to get creative and draw your fear? Are you willing to befriend your fear? Are you willing to have a conversation with your fear? Are you willing to journal about it? Are you willing to play the so what if game? Right? Do you know what the so what if game is?
No, can you tell me?
Yeah. So it's like the fear usually says that, well, what if this happens? Right. So for example, well, I'm afraid that I open the business and it fails. Okay. So what if it fails? Well, if it fails, then I won't have any money. Okay. So what if you don't have any money? Well, then I'll probably have to apply for another job. Okay. So what if you apply for another job? Right. So we go through that process of, so what
Kind
if
of
this,
playing out the fear and resourcing around worst case scenarios.
right? Because usually we get to a place where then somebody's like, this is so silly. Like, this is, this is so silly. Of course I could go get another job. I've been employed. I'm highly employable. I've been working this whole time, so it's getting somebody to realize that the fear is just holding you back. It wants to keep you small. It doesn't want you to be seen. It doesn't want you to feel vulnerable. It doesn't want you to feel you to feel criticized. And of course, when we're opening ourselves up, when we're going out into the world, whether it's writing a book, publishing an academic article, opening a business, selling a product, whatever it is, we are putting ourselves in a place of visibility, which opens up millions and millions of expert critics. And I say that in a very sarcastic way.
That's true. There are always people out there willing to tell you what you're doing wrong or why the way you're going about something is not appropriate.
Or why it's not going to work. Right? Why that is ridiculous. Why do you want to go to art school? Nobody can make a living going to art school. Right? Okay, so if that was what you were told, and that was your origin story of becoming a creative arts therapist, is you majored in some arts-based degree, whether it's art, music, dance, drama, right? Writing. Authors are a dime a dozen. You'll never make any money as an author. Who are you kidding? Right? Like there are all those kinds of messages that we are indoctrinated with from a very young age, whether or not we had a family member or a parent who gave us that message. Sometimes we have very, very supportive parents, and they encourage us to pursue our artistic endeavors, and they don't send those messages. However, we still hear them from folks in the outside world, and those do become encoded, and we have to work on decoding any internalized messages of lack that we may have picked up along the way because other people were operating in a place of fear and insecurity. And we don't have to do that ourselves. Like, we can feel fear and we can still move forward with whatever it is that we want to accomplish, whatever dream we have. And I feel like that's my mission. That's my mission, is to help people realize that whatever dream you have is possible. And that's true whether we're talking about working with somebody in therapy, or whether we're talking about working with somebody who wants to open their own practice, or, grow into an entrepreneur as a therapist.
Yeah. That was a great answer. I have no follow-ups there. You're so thorough. Uh, but I do want to ask you something else that occurred to me. I want to ask you to tell our listeners a little bit about how you make business preparation and organizing yourself towards private practice, how you make it fun. And let me give a little caveat with this. So one of the things I know about you and about your work is that you bring a creativity and inspiration to everything you do, even things like talking about price setting in private practice. And, for a person who, I tend to find that when people talk about going to a professional conference, including the summit, but not exclusively the summit, they tend to categorize sessions, many people do, in terms of the fun sessions and the important sessions that they expect to be more boring and dry, but might be essential to what they're doing. So if I'm going to the summit, for example, I might take, a session that's really centered around a particular art technique or a material or a way of working that feels more sort of creative and playful and like it's feeding my soul, but might not have a direct linear application to my practice or to the work that I'm doing. And then there's the sessions that we go to at a professional conference. Oftentimes they're couched in ethics or business 101 or something like what you're doing, which is really a curated crash course in helping people to grow and establish and scale their business. And people think of that as the stuff that's more dry and less creative and less fun, but that is necessary. And if I'm going to start a private practice, I'm going to go to that session because I have to. And one of the things I know about you is that that is not a clearly drawn line. And you do bring a kind of whimsy and creativity and fun to even the most serious and important business tasks. So can you speak a little bit to the ways that you do that?
Okay, well, first, let me just say, if you were a person that sat in the first rendition of this presentation many years ago, I would say it probably wasn't very fun. I don't think at that point, I was just so excited to share like the didactic material that I overloaded. And I've been pulling back, and I still hear from people like, it's just so much information. but I, but I feel like all of the information that I'm sharing is really important, and it's hard to like water it down. I want people to feel like they have the tools that they need to be successful. So in the, more recent, presentations, I try not to overload, although you still get a lot. And then I try to interweave some like fun activities. So like starting off with a guided visualization, which goes through like, it integrates both your personal vision of having a practice, right? Because we want to go back into the why. Why are you doing this? What's the purpose? Why do you want to have a private practice? Well, I want to be able to see clients the way I want to see them. Okay, well, why else? Because there has to be a why else. It if that's it, you could stay where you're at and you could continue to do that. There has to be a driving reason that you want to leave and do this on your own. And usually it has to do with your personal life. I want to have more time with my children. I want to have more time with my family. I want to be able to take vacation when I want to take vacation. I want to be able to earn more money. I want to be able to um I want to be able to work doing telehealth and be able to travel around the country and be able to continue to have a practice while moving about. There has to be a why. So we go into a guided visualization which taps into those whys. Why personally are you doing this? What are the personal outcomes that you want to experience? And then the professional ones. So we start off at home, like you wake up refreshed after a wonderful night of sleep because you were able to sleep because you weren't stressed out and overwhelmed by all of the stuff that you had to manage in the chaotic environment that you may have been coming from. And like, what's that process in the morning? Now that you have a practice, what are you able to experience in your morning routine that perhaps you were not otherwise able to integrate? And then going through the aesthetics of what your space actually looks like. What do you want it to look like? What's the feeling that you want to experience when you walk in the door of your office, but moreover, that your client experiences when they walk in the office? And so we kind of go through this whole process of like your very best day and doing great work with whoever your ideal client is and the way that you want to work with them. And like we go through that process and then kind of create about that. What did that look like? What are the key takeaways? And give people a chance to talk about it. And so that's one thing that we've done.
So you're bringing art making in and visualization and goal setting and all of the pieces that surround the nuts and bolts of what forms you need to use and how you choose to find your space or set your
Mhm.
fees or things like that also.
So yeah, so I have a whole system, and so people get my Excel spreadsheet, which each tab has a different section for a different purpose. And so we're looking at that again. personal and professional, because your professional now has to support your personal, right? So we need to take a full inventory of what is it that you need as a human being. What are the resources that you need to take care of yourself and your family? And not just to like meet the minimum, but what would feel really good for you, right? Like a lot of us as therapists, we are some of the internalized beliefs that many therapists carry around, not all of them, but many do, is that you didn't get in this field for the money. You're not a good therapist if you're not seeing people for free or low cost. You need to be seeing people that don't otherwise have access to services. Now, I don't think that those are bad things, right? I think that they do have their place. However, if all we do is subscribe to that, we never get to a place of security for ourselves. And if we are not in an authentic place of security, that can lead to unethical decision making based out of scarcity. So it's really important that we know what is it that you need to be successful as a human being and have all of your responsibilities taken care of financially from your business. Now, maybe this doesn't matter if you're independently wealthy and you don't actually need to pull out money from your business. And for some people, that is the case. That's wonderful. But that is by and large, that is not true for most of us.
Right. That's a rare predicament.
Right. So in the system though, if you want to be able to say see somebody at a lower rate, there's a way for you to calculate it so that you're not seeing everybody at a lower rate such that you can't pay your bills. Because everything that you earn, you have to pay your business, you have to pay for the operations of your business, and then you also have to pay for the operations of your household. So if you think about it, your budget that you're managing is now doubling and tripling what you're used to.
So one of the things that you do with the Creative Clinicians Corner when you're consulting with clinicians who are looking to launch a private practice and they want to start out and they want to get into it and they may or may not know the questions that they need to be asking themselves and the tools that they need to develop. I know that you work with a lot of clinicians who are considering taking that leap of faith, wondering when it would be right for them, what they have to do to get there. And I think that it's probably in many cases sort of most ideal to be considering all of these issues and setting up your private practice efficiently and effectively and ethically right from the outset.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, we know that oftentimes that doesn't happen, or things are overlooked, or practices are set up in a sort of more hasty and reactive way. And I'm wondering, because I know that you work not only with aspiring private practice clinicians, but also with clinicians who are already in private
Mm-hmm.
practice, why might somebody benefit from your services? How would somebody, let's say, for example, myself, I've been in private practice since 2006. How would I know if I need a consultant? What would be the type of things
Mm-hmm.
that I might want to consider to think about? Could a private practice consultant help me better develop what I have? And how would I know if that would be something I should consider?
That's a really excellent question. It's a little bit challenging, but I think that by and large, you probably would have a sense that something is awry and something is amiss. That you're not really sure. You might not be sure about what it is, but you feel like you're missing something. It could be pertaining to marketing. Maybe like you're not sure how to let other people know about your practice and what you do, and therefore you're getting clients, but they're kind of slow to trickle in. and you don't have a consistent phone call. You don't your phone is not consistently ringing every day, and every call isn't going to be transitioned to an actual client, right? Sometimes people call and it doesn't work out, but you need to be having calls to come in to convert them into clients or emails or whatever. So it might be that your marketing is amiss, or you might be ready to level up, but you're not sure what to do next. And you need some support around that and how to kind of go about envisioning that next aspect of growth for your business. Or it might be that you haven't done a very good job at setting your fees and you're not earning the amount of money that you need to. And you need some guidance and support around really looking at all your numbers and evaluating what needs to go, what needs to say, how do I analyze where I'm spending my money to determine if I'm getting an adequate return on my investment? Do I have systems in place to be able to look at that on a periodic basis throughout the year so that I can then make strong decisions about, you know what, I don't need this. I'm letting that go. That's costing me more money and it's not really benefiting my practice. So it might be around those kinds of decisions. It might be like it might just be um, needing support because you feel as though you're doing this all alone and you have ideas that you think might be the right ideas, but maybe you've put them out into these open forums, which there are a lot of open therapy forums around in social media. And oftentimes, I know for me, sometimes I'm like, I can't even look at that. I can't, because somebody asks a question and then there's 50 competing responses that are all giving different information. And then you go, how am I supposed to like determine the misinformation versus the opinion versus the fact that's coming up there?
It's a great point. I mean, and I think that this is one of the reasons why people don't necessarily seek professional consultation around growing or scaling practice, because it feels like there's so much out there, in some cases, too much. I was just connecting the other day with a clinician local to me who is launching her private practice again. She had been working in the field in community mental health and had a small private practice, and then had taken time off for maternity leave, a sort of extended time off. And she's getting back into it and was posing a question online to the professional community about how to grow her practice and get more clients in numbers specifically. And, somebody suggested that she develop her psychologytoday.com profile, and somebody suggested that that's entirely the wrong way to go about it and that's a horrible platform to use. And somebody suggested that she should develop her website, and somebody else said, well, you don't want to waste too much time and money with your own website because nobody's going to find it, and then you need to get into AdWords.
Oh my gosh, that's awful, awful, awful.
Well, the point that I'm trying to make is that there was, probably 50 different responses on there that people respond, as they do on social media, with such conviction about this is the right thing or this is the wrong thing. And almost unilaterally, I would say, this is probably based on their own personal experience. So whatever they're
Totally.
responding about is, this is true for me, this did work for me, or this didn't work for me. And one of the things that I know about you, both in your personal life and more broadly in your professional life, but also in your work consulting with clinicians, is that while you are fairly transparent and upfront about what your own experience is and what has worked for you and what hasn't, you also don't put it forth as though what worked for you will work for everybody. So
Right.
I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the fact of how do you choose what you put forth or the recommendations you make? Since you're somebody that doesn't presume that what works for you works for everybody, how do you help clients figure out what will work for them? How do you make recommendations? What are those based on?
Well, I feel like it's similar to the way I operate in therapy, which is, I'm going to tell you about all the things that I know, right? I'm going to give you all these resources and skills and things that I know. But it's up to you to implement them and test them out and see, treat it as an experiment and create a hypothesis around it, and then test it, right? So, for example, with Psychology Today, I've been on there for years. I don't particularly love it, but I keep it up there for a couple of reasons. But over the years, I've made many, 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 many changes to the profile and how I write it. I took webinars on how specifically to craft a Psychology Today profile so that it shines, because it's like Etsy for therapists. You find one and then you start looking around to see what else is out there, and you can't get back to the original one that you found. There's just so much on there. So I think it's important to know who you are. One, who are you as a therapist? What is your personality? Where do you feel like you shine and it's easy for you to be in that spot or do that thing? And where is it challenging? Now, it's not to say that I wouldn't recommend you experimenting in the challenging zones, but I would say let's focus primarily on what feels fun and easy for you. Because if it's fun and easy, there's no resistance. And if there's no resistance, there's going to be action. So if I try to force somebody to do something that's challenging for them, that they feel a lot of resistance around, what's going to happen? We're not going to get anything done.
Right. It's not going to go anywhere.
Right? It needs to be fun and it needs to be easy, at least starting out, so that we can build the momentum and we can get the ball rolling. And then once we, experience some wins, then they might be more willing to step out of that comfort zone and go into a place marketing themselves that feel a little more scary, let's say. So what's your personality? Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Are you an ambivert? Because that's going to really determine where you're going to, feel most comfortable in marketing and designing and structuring your business. But also, in addition to that, you need to know your clients and where your clients are. So if in order to reach your ideal client, you need to figure out, okay, well, what's fun and easy for me that's going to meet them where they're at, so that they know about me, so they can come to me and I can help them. I don't know if that answers it, but
It does. That's a really, really good answer. And really speaks to the way you individualize for each client and the way you don't push your own agenda of this is what does work because I know this is what worked for me, the way you really tailor, the way you help them to find their own unique passions
mhm.
and ways of promoting that. So if people are interested in hearing you present and working with you in a presentation, they can see you at the next Expressive Therapies Summit.
Yes, so that's going to be the LA Summit, and it's going to be online this year. Obviously, with everything that's still going on with COVID-19, that event is also going to be held online. So it doesn't matter wherever you are in the world, you can attend. It just might not be in the most comfortable time zone. But yes, I'll be presenting there, and people can learn more by going to the Expressive Therapy Summit website, and you click on the LA tab, and then that will open up and you'll see all the wonderful presenters that are going to be at that conference, including
For
mine.
those of the audience members who haven't already experienced the summit, it is the premier professional development and training event for professionals in art therapy, music therapy, dance movement therapy, drama therapy, psychodrama, poetry therapy, intermodal expressive arts therapies, and draws faculty from around the world. And yeah, I think I can confidently say, even after this past fall's online summit, the connection and collaboration and the use of the arts in therapy can effectively transition to an online format. So if you haven't visited the summit yet, this is a great year to do it. But for people that aren't able to attend the summit, or perhaps are attending and excited and overwhelmed by the competing and fabulous sessions in the same time slot, where else can you be found? Or if somebody wanted to work with you individually and gain consultation on the development of their own private practice or other professional dreams, how should they go about doing that?
Sure. So if they went to the website, creativeclinicianscorner.com, there's tons of resources on there. I have a handful of blog posts, obviously, all of the podcasts that have been recorded thus far. But there's also a place to sign up for individual consultation with me. And so there's those services. But I also have a mastermind group that is starting this year. And so that'll be going on, and you can sign up there on the webpage.
And tell us, what is a mastermind group?
Oh, yeah. So a mastermind group is a group of people. Usually they are focused on a unique topic that pertains to business. So typically it comes from business development, and there's a bunch of different people. It could be the same type of business, or it could be different businesses. For us, it's going to be focused on therapists that are in the process of building and growing their private practice. And we meet for an hour a week, 3 times a month. And in one of the hours, I'll be doing a teaching topic based on whatever the members most need. So I'll be, individualizing the topics that I present for people that relate to business growth and development, and they'll get access to different tools and resources that I develop. And then in the other 2 weeks, it will be kind of like a hot seat where, as a member, you present a topic to the group and you say, this is something that I'm working on. It's a challenge that I'm working on. So for example, it could be like website copywriting. How I'm working on my copy and I need some assistance. We'll screen share it. We'll go over it. And the members will provide feedback, constructive feedback. The idea is that we're receiving feedback from other people to help us grow. So sometimes you might have to kill your babies. I know it's such a terrible metaphor, but it's true, right? Like, you've given birth to this thing and now you have to kill it because it's really not good.
We get attached even to bad writing.
Yes. So, it's an opportunity to get constructive feedback so that you can level up and grow. And so each the weeks that we have the hot seats, 2 hot seats, so you have 25 minutes of that support. And then in between, I'll be available like messaging for individualized support through the group.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. And you mentioned your tools, and I just want to highlight this for those who don't already know. You are so generous with your tools. And I know some of your tools have been inspired by other things that you've seen or found, and some of them are purely things that you really felt a loss of, like I've never found one of these, or I don't see this in the community. It doesn't exist in a free Google download or something. And you've developed a lot of tools. Which is so great, especially for developing or practicing clinicians who are feeling overwhelmed of either not knowing what tools they need or feeling like they have to reinvent the wheel and don't know how to start with that. Can you tell us of the tools that you've developed and used? What are the 2 or 3 that are most well received, that people are most excited about? Like, I didn't even know I needed this tool, but it's exactly what I needed and helps me do what I need to do.
Well, I think I would like to think, and I've gotten positive feedback from the fee calculation tool that I have, and it really kind of, it's a deep dive. I mean, it's complex. It's a lot of math, but it's math that anybody can do because it's basically addition and division, addition, multiplication, and division. So it's complex, but everybody can do it. And it's helpful in getting the right fee. So in that way, that's been helpful for people because it gives a tangible where you're not just guessing out of thin air or looking towards what somebody else chose to, charge. We don't know what their circumstances are. So how can we be sure that that fee is appropriate for us? So that, and then I've developed some journaling tools recently that focus in and dive in on money mindset, to overcome some self-limiting beliefs around money and what to charge and things that come up, right? Like, how do you feel if you go to collect $150 from your client for the session? What comes up for you? What if that was raised to $175 a session? What would come up for you? Some people are out there starting off in private practice and only charging $25 an hour, which doesn't even cover any salary. I mean, you'd be better off working at McDonald's.
You pay that much for office space by the hour in many places.
So yeah. So that's been well received. And another one about, just kind of the envisioning piece.
Great. I love that you have so many tools that you develop that are really relevant to people that are at different points in their developmental journey of their practice.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being a guest on your own podcast today and for letting me interview you. And I want to redirect people again. If they are interested, they should go visit creativeclinicianscorner.com. And certainly you will be having more wonderful guests on the podcast in the future, which highlight different aspects, both of the creative arts therapies, but also the aspects of business that really help us to grow as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this with me, Rachel. It was a lot of fun.
I'm so glad. Me too. I love it. I love this experience and getting to talk to you about the work that you're doing in a different way.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Creative Psychotherapist. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For show notes, downloads, and additional resources, head over to the website at www.creativeclinicianscorner.com.